Hey everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 1:20. Thank you for attending 2020 Sunstone Digital Symposium session 233 titled LGBTQIA+ Experiences in Mormonism. The audio from the session will be available for purchase at sunstone.org after the symposium. The video recording of this session will be available in the Whova app for the remainder of 2020. Please type your questions into the Whova app to be addressed during the Q&A throughout the session and also at the end of the session. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There is more than one way to Mormon." We invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing at sunstone.org. About this presentation, often absent in the larger LDS conversations is the voice of LGBTQIA people. This session will feature LGBTQIA+ individuals sharing their experiences in and around Mormonism. I'll take a second to introduce you to our speakers before we begin. Chris Irvin is a trans-masculine, non-binary person who lives in Bluffdale, Utah. Chris has been married to their husband, Nate, for 13 years. They have an 11-year-old son, Toby, who is already an awesome ally to queer people. Chris is passionate about raising awareness for transgender people, especially transgender youth. Their goal is to be the person they needed when they were younger. Chris is known as Twitter's possum parent because they try to lift and carry the queer community like a possum carrying its young. Tiana Matson is a freelance videographer in Boise, Idaho. She is a lifelong member of the LDS Church, served a mission in Cleveland, Ohio, lives with bipolar disorder, and is gay. Megan McIntosh received a BA in English from Southern Virginia University in 2013 and an MFA in writing from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2018. He runs the Queer Steak podcast and works in the best industry there is, cheese. Nicholas R. Stewart is originally from California and now resides in Baltimore, Maryland, where he works as a transit planner. He is no longer active, believing member of the church. Active in transitioning, ex and post-Mormon social media groups, Nicholas is a fan of forums like Sunstone, where people can share their stories and experiences. After spending most of his life in the closet, Nicholas is now out and openly bisexual. I'll now give the floor to our presenters.
Good. It's afternoon for me, so good afternoon. I think it might still be morning out in Utah. So wherever you are, happy time of day. My name is Nick, and I am bisexual. I did grow up in the church. I was born in Southern California. I apologize for the lighting. I was born in Southern California and was raised there, lived in California until about 3 years ago when I moved to Maryland. Growing up in the church was a thing. For me, growing up in the church was, I think, a little different than a lot of other folks for a variety of reasons. I'm biracial. I was in Southern California, where the church already is not necessarily the most African American place you can find, and in a small beach town in Southern California, there's even fewer of us. So that was already kind of one thing. I'm adopted, which is another thing, and I always knew that I was not straight, but I wasn't really sure what I was. Bisexual was not something that was kind of in my lexicon at the time. I knew what the church said I should be striving for when it came to, my life. I was supposed to, all the missionary, the priesthood, the missionary stuff, marry a woman in the temple. And I didn't have a problem with marrying a woman, but I also knew that I was attracted to men as well. But I didn't know that there was a thing for that. So I thought I might be gay because I liked men, but I also liked women. So what is a boy to do? at some point I was probably in middle school, maybe high school, when the term bisexual was something I heard. And that was kind of when I was like, oh, there it is. Um, and I think that was kind of that was a really good moment for me, because it made me feel like I had a name for it, right? Until you can kind of name it, it's kind of this like, what's wrong with me? And turns out there's A, nothing wrong with me, and B, there's actually a name for what I am. So that was nice. However, I was still in the church, and the church made it fairly clear to me, although in my case, not necessarily harshly or overly negatively, at least not until I was older, that being straight was what was supposed to be, that was God's will. And so that was kind of what I needed to do. I benefited from the fact that I was bisexual, and so I can pass as straight because I'm more than happy dating, and in my case, marrying a woman. For anyone not familiar, passing is pretty much what it sounds like. It means that you don't necessarily appear to be something other than kind of what people assume when they first look at you. In my case, by and large, people think I'm straight because I'm married to a woman. So that certainly made my life in the church a little easier. And it's part of why I was able to, stay in the closet as long as I did, because I did end up falling in love with a woman who I married in the temple. And at that point, the sort of, I should come out, became a little less, I was in a relationship with a woman, right? So what was the need? And I was in the church still, and et cetera, et cetera. I came out to my wife, I honestly don't remember, it's been 5-6 years. I came out to my mother shortly thereafter. I think my mom is here somewhere. And then I came out to other members of my family shortly after that. And then I came out on social media 3 years ago, I think. That went over fairly well. I think that with the Mormon perspective, one of the things that I hear a lot from people is, sort of how homophobic the church is and transphobic, and it's something I'm definitely certainly conscious of, but I've been, again, fairly fortunate in that my own personal experiences in the church have not necessarily been that way, like in the wards I've been in, and that's purely a function of the people that have been in those wards and the leadership in those wards, which is unfortunate. I wish that everyone in the church, whether gay, straight, trans, bi, whatever, were able to have had wards and leadership like I was fortunate enough to be in, because I think that more people who wanted to be at church but feel not welcome there would probably still be there because they'd feel welcome, because that was the kinds of wards that I had. For me, the fact that I'm bisexual is not why I left the church. I left the church because I just didn't believe. But I certainly know people who leave the church because either the church's teachings about people that are not straight, or the way they were treated. Like I totally understand that. I think it's totally a valid reason. But I also have friends. I mean, I have a very close friend who is lesbian and felt kind of forced out of the church because of that. And that's, I think, unfortunate, because she would very much like to, she still very much feels pulled towards the church, but just doesn't feel welcome anymore. And that's sort of that kind of drives my desire to have conversations like this, both because I think it's important for Mormons, whether you're an active mainstream LDS Mormon, or you're an ex-Mormon, or you're a Community of Christ, or any of the other, expressions of Mormonism, like in the whole Latter-day Saint movement. I think it's important for voices to be heard from the LGBTQIA plus community. Our stories, our experiences. There are a lot of people in the spectrum of Mormonism who are allies, and even more who would like to be, but I think don't either feel like they can or don't know how to do it well. I think there's a lot of good out there, and I think it's important that that gets kind of a light shown on it. But at the same time, there's also a lot of stuff that is harmful, and I think it's important that folks who have been in those situations, who have been in wards, been in these communities, and have had things happen to them, good or bad, are able to talk about them and kind of share that with people. I feel like in the course of my lifetime, I mean, I'm 40. I was 28. In fact, the year I got married, was Prop 8 in California, which I'm sure you all have heard about. And that was rough for me. At the same time, I was getting married. I got married in July that year. I was spending time at church, and they were talking about how we needed to go out and, stop gay people from getting married. Extremely problematic for me. Why should my marriage to my wife be okay, but two other consenting adults who love each other should not be able to get married just because they are both men or both women? At the same, that same year, actually in October, right before the election, my lesbian mothers-in-law got legally married. They'd been together for I think a decade plus at that point already, but they got legally married. And again, why should the church be, first of all, involving themselves in the law that much, but be supporting the idea that the two people who love each other should not be able to get married. Prop 8 was tough. But then, I later lived in a ward in a stake where, when Salt Lake contacted the local stake president and was like, hey, your stake needs to, chip in this much money for the effort, the stake president didn't go to the wards and ask for it. The stake president actually paid it all out of his own pocket, which it's not what I would have done, but I wouldn't have given anything. But the fact that he chose not to go to the wards and make that a topic in the wards. I remember sitting in my ward, and I think there were 2 total announcements about Prop 8 in that ward, and my ward was in Oakland. We were in the Bay Area. There were protesters out in front of the Stake Center, which is on the Temple grounds in Oakland. And the very first announcement they made about Prop 8 was at the very beginning of the public kind of campaign, when the church was getting involved. It was, if anyone is interested, go talk to so-and-so. They're the person who's spearheading the volunteer effort. And then a second time, they made a similar thing, but that was it. There was no regular, hey, this is what's going. Which is not the experience that a lot of other people had, I know. And, but I appreciate the fact that I did have leaders that were like that. At the same time, I was in a ward where, when I was in grad school, one of my student organizations was fundraising by working at one of the beverage booths at the Oakland Pride Festival. And I'm serving drinks, I hand this guy a beer. As he's walking away, he spilled it, and he came over and he's like, dude, I spilled it. And I was like, don't worry, I'll get you another. And he was so happy, he leaned over and kissed me. And so I was telling that to a friend of mine at a ward picnic, and a guy overhears and goes, oh, that's so disgusting. I would have beat him. And I was like, whoa, dude, no, that's not cool. So those mentalities exist too. Not just in the church, but they certainly do exist in the church. But yeah, I think that for anybody, the church can be very up and down. There are plenty of people who can check just about every box the church has that should mean that you're, perfect in the eyes of the church. You can be white, straight, male, like whatever, and the church might still not work for you. You might still have a bad time. Conversely, you can be, any number of other things, and you might have a great time in the church. The church might work really well for you. I certainly am not I'm certainly not an advocate, of people, of trying to like force people to leave the church, or nor to try to make it work for them if it's not. I'm very much sort of a, do what works for you kind of guy. But because I again, I do know people for whom the church is something that otherwise works for them, except for the fact that they don't feel welcome because they're gay, for example. And that makes me sad. I don't believe in the church, but if the church does work for you, if that's where you want to be, you should be able to be there and feel comfortable there. Even even when I was open about being a non-believer and not being straight, I never really came out to my ward, like to like the last ward I was in. Although I was Facebook friends with many of those people when I did come out on Facebook, but by then I wasn't in that ward. But I made references to, not being straight. But in that ward, people were pretty chill about it. No one really said it. I mean, I used to come to church drinking coffee for a while. So again, I was in the Bay Area. It's a really different place there. But just, I think it's important that, we understand that there is sort of this whole spectrum of what it means to be a Mormon and what the Mormon experience is. And, it's not necessarily good or bad just because of X, Y, or Z. But certain things do certainly make it more difficult. Being LGBTIQ in the church is certainly can be far more challenging than being, a straight, white, thin male, or even, being a woman, being a white woman in the church is, generally easier than being, LGBTIQ in the church. But yeah, so I'll kind of leave it at that for now. And then when we have questions, you'll probably hear my voice again.
Tiana, would you like to go next? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, did you say me or Mika?
Oh, yeah, do you want to go next?
Sure, I can go next. I wrote down some notes last night. Let's see if I hit everything. So my name's Tiana. Like Trace said, I'm in Boise, Idaho. I'm a freelance videographer, and I identify as gay, a gay woman. I'm not opposed to the term lesbian, but that's not a term that I generally identify with. But yeah, so I figured I'd just kind of share my, I guess, my life story. I don't really know how else to go about this, but so the first time I noticed something different, that I was different, was probably second grade. I remember the other little girls in my class were talking about the boys that they had crushes on, and that was a foreign concept to me. I was like, how on earth do you decide what a crush is or who your crush is? And I just assumed that it meant that it was the boy that was least annoying. And so that's pretty much how I determined who my crush was, all the way through middle school and even into high school. I was just like, this boy doesn't annoy me so much, I must have a crush on him. And I didn't really know what an actual crush felt like. Looking back on it, I definitely had some crushes. They just were on girls and not boys. And so my first, I don't know. So in ninth grade, high school, I remember my best friend and I, every morning before school started, we would stand outside the band room door just talking before school started. Because I was in band. I played the saxophone for 12 years. Um, and I remember one morning we were standing there talking, and my saxophone case was standing on end, and I was kind of leaning over it. So the two of us were, face to face. I was a little bit taller than her, but and I just like all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I really want to kiss her. And like my whole body got tingly, my heart was racing, my brain got fuzzy, and I was like, what the heck is this? This is weird. I gotta just run away. And so I just quickly ended the conversation and ran into the band room, and she was like, okay, well, that was weird. And I was like, I have no idea what that was. Do most people feel that? That must be normal. Like people just want to kiss their best friend randomly. And it kind of freaked me out. But we continued being really good friends. Right before my family moved, I remember one night we were sitting there, we were sitting there watching a movie, and we started holding hands. And after that, I don't remember anything about the movie or what happened. I just remember like I could have just lived in that moment for forever, just holding hands with her. And it just was like such an intense emotion. And so, my heart was beating, and I remember that was the first time that I really kind of felt like this attraction to another person, like a sexual attraction to another person. Um, and so I was kind of devastated when my family moved. We were living in Southern Nevada at the time. And we moved up to Provo area. We were in Pleasant Grove. Um, and so, and I didn't really, have very many crushes living there. I remember being in the theater program and kind of getting the feels whenever we had like strong female leads in shows during rehearsal and performances and stuff. But I was like, not a big deal. I just admire them. Um, and then things kind of changed. My freshman year of college, my roommates and I were really in love with this show. It was the first bisexual dating show. It was far more entertaining than The Bachelor. It was a shot at love with Tila Tequila. And I don't remember how often the episodes were, every week or something, my roommates and I would sit down and watch the show together. And it was just fun and entertaining. And one night I'd gotten home late from class and I was watching some TV, and a rerun had come on. And so I sat there watching it, and I realized in that moment that I only ever rooted for the women in the show. I didn't care about the men. Sure, they had ripped bodies, and I was like, meh. I don't understand the appeal. And then it felt like I had this little voice in my head that was like, hey, you're a lesbian. And I was like, no. I'm not doing this. This is not a thing. And I just kind of like stuffed that way down. So I doubled down on scripture reading and praying and being active in church and attending institute and stuff like that. And so, the typical like pray the gay away approach, which for anybody that doesn't know this, that just simply does not work. And so I, continued stuffing it down. And I had a few mild crushes on classmates and friends and things. And then I guess it was about 3 years later. So this would have been 2010, I think. I had a roommate that I was just completely infatuated with. I would get butterflies every time she walked in the room. If she like put her arm around my shoulder, it was just like my heart racing, my brain goes fuzzy, and I was just like so drawn to her. Um, and we were just really good friends. I would stay up late. We would stay up late talking. And our bedroom doors were next to each other at the end of the hallway in our apartment. And we would just sit there in our little corner talking. And I would sit there and wait for her when she would get home from class, and we'd hang out. We'd go on weekend adventures, just stuff like that. And the only problem was that she was very straight, and she was waiting for her missionary to come home. And that was really difficult to watch her get engaged and do the street girl thing and date boys and things like that. And so that was really difficult for me. And that's when I, first really started to admit to myself that that there was something there, that I had some same-sex attraction, as the church would say. And this was about the time that the Mormon and Gay website came out. And to give the church credit on this is that's about the time that they changed their stance from being gay in any way, shape, or form is a sin against humanity, to this feeling of same-sex attraction isn't a sin, but acting on it is. And so that gave me a lot of reassurance, like, okay, I'm not this terrible person for feeling this way. I can still be an active member of the church. I can still have my faith. I can still, live a normal life. So I know some people really struggle with that, the church's stance, but for me in that moment, like, I got to give the church credit for that, because it saved me from a lot of heartache, because it gave me validation. And I found other gay members of the church that I honestly thought I was the only one. And so that website did do something for me. It was a positive. But so my roommate got married, and I decided to go on a mission, because why not? When you're not really dating boys, you go on a mission, right? So I served in the Cleveland, Ohio mission, and it was. I look back on it and I'm a little bit embarrassed about it that I did that, just because I am gay and I was attracted to all of my companions. But at the same time, it was very good that I went, because it's led me to this point in my life. I had a major crush on my MTC companion, and then was very attracted to my trainer. But on top of all of this, I was having some mental health issues. Excuse me. And I had been transferred to my second area, and I had a complete mental breakdown, essentially. And I told my mission president, I was like, hey, I'm struggling with this anxiety and depression. I think I should probably go home. He's like, no, just talk to the therapist. Well, therapist didn't help. Okay, well, talk to the doctor, adjust your meds. Well, that didn't really help. And it was bad enough I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. It was, and all this time I was thinking, if I just read my scriptures, if I'm just faithful enough, then God will, give me the strength to persevere, and I'll be okay. Like, this anxiety will go away if I just read my scriptures. It doesn't work like that. Another one of those instances where you're trying to pray the gay away, pray away the anxiety, whatever. It doesn't work like that. And so it was bad enough that I called up my mission president. I was like, hey, I have same-sex attraction. And finally he was like, yeah, we should probably send you home. And so because I had to come out to my mission president, the first person I ever breathed any of this to, that this was my experience, that I was attracted to women, that meant that I had to come out to my parents. Um, and so it was kind of weird because I was still very much in missionary mode. Like, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to be active in the church. I'm going to be, marry a man. I'm going to have a regular family. Like, my life is going to be normal, like everybody else. And that is not really how it works. It's not really how it worked out for me. Um, and so coming out to my parents led to a lot of really clunky conversations. The first couple years that I was home from my mission, I went through a lot of life assessment, trying to figure myself out, because I was finally diagnosed with bipolar when I got home from my mission, and the doctor was like, "Well, you were on the wrong medication, and that's why you had this breakdown." And I'm like, "Well, that makes me feel better, I guess." And so, but I had a lot of really clunky conversations with my parents about being attracted to women and everything. And so in 2014, last night I was going through one of my old journals, and I'm really glad that I started writing these things down, because 2014 was when I really started grappling with this completely. Like, I had finally accepted that I was gay. I still hadn't admitted it out loud to myself. I hadn't really spoken the words "I'm gay" to anybody. But my parents knew, and my bishop knew, that I was attracted to women. And so I just wanted to share a couple of little journal entries from that time, because I like to be vulnerable about this stuff, because I know it's going to connect with somebody else. It's going to resonate with other people. Because if I just do this broad overview of my life, it may not be as healing for other people. So I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here, and share a couple little things. This was from the date on this is May 21st, 2014. This was the very first entry in this little journal that I had. And I said, "I have no idea how to say this, but I'm attracted to women. I hate thinking about it and rehashing it, but I can't get over it, and it's still there, and I can't get it to go away. Since I came home, I haven't really had a friend that did that to me, but now I'm having to deal with the worst one yet. I don't know why, but she gets me all Twitter-pated and flushed. I'm just so into her. I've never actually wanted to go full-on gay for someone before. It's so frustrating. So much of me just has this terrible instinct that I want to follow, and these feelings that have seemingly out of nowhere taken over my body, but my spirit is crying out that this is wrong, and my head knows the eternal consequences of it, and my soul just feels like it's like it's being ripped to shreds over it. I don't understand why the Lord would allow people to experience these things, yet command just the opposite. And I don't understand why I have to be the one to deal with all of this." And so that was really when I started grappling with this. Like, okay, I need to deal with this. So 2015, a lot of clunky conversations with my parents. 2016, I found a YouTuber. She was the first gay member of the church that I had seen, aside from those church videos on the website. But this was the first time that I'd really seen or heard of anybody else in the wild, so to speak. And she just was talking about her experience, and it just resonated with me so deeply. I was just so transfixed by her. I watched all of her content, and watching her transformation, and then I ended up reaching out to her, and we started this back and forth, and even though nothing really came of this friendship or anything, but it was a huge turning point for me. It was I remember going to the bathroom and staring myself in the mirror, and I said, "There's no two ways about it. You are gay," and it was a very life-changing moment. Like, it was very hard to get those words out, very hard um, to just recognize myself in those terms. Um, and shortly after that, I told my mom, I'm like, "Hey, I don't think I can date men. Um, right now, the plan is to just be celibate, to stay active in the church, but I'm giving myself permission to stop trying to date because it really hadn't gone anywhere. Mostly because I just wasn't attracted to anybody." Um, and so that was a huge turning point. And I left that open ended because I knew eventually I probably would want to start dating women. Um, and so 2016 was a huge turning point. And then over the next couple of years, I still was grappling with this, trying to reconcile this need for a companion, for a life partner, for a wife or a girlfriend with the doctrines of the church. And it all came to a head this time last year, actually. I was just super depressed and upset. There were a lot of other family life changes going on. And I felt like I had ticked all of the boxes that the church required. You know, I'd been baptized, I'd been to the temple, I served a mission. And I was like, what's left? Like, I'm not going to have a family. I'm not ever going to get married. I'm not going to date because these seemingly arbitrary rules of what I have to do here to enjoy my afterlife. And I was just miserable. And I was like, what is the point of even living anymore? If I've done everything here that I'm supposed to do and the next life is supposed to be better, let's just accelerate the process. And so I actively started making plans to take my life. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I was like, this, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. If I really want to live and be happy, I can't do it on the church's timeline. And so I started re-examining my testimony again, like, okay, you know, I know the prophets today are fallible people. They're not perfect. But I'm going to have to cast some doubt on the church founders because, you know, supposedly Joseph Smith had all of these miraculous revelations. And so the church has to be perfect, you know? And so, you know, I started digging into church history. Jury's still out on all of it, but it was enough to make me feel comfortable. Like, okay, I can make this decision. I can make this life change to start dating women. And live openly gay and still maintain some faith and testimony in the church. And so in November this last year, I, you know, came out to my parents, or not came out, they already knew, but, you know, I came to my parents, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start dating, you know, it's time for me to do that. And my mom, you know, bless her heart, over the last 8 years, she's really come a long way. I remember at first she would say things like, well, I don't consider you one of those people, one of those gay people. You're not like them. And she would make some really derogatory statements. And now she's one of my biggest supporters. A couple weeks ago for Pride, my mom was like, why don't we put a sign in the window that says love is love and paint it all rainbow? And so, you know, my parents have just, you know, as I've become more comfortable living openly as a gay person, they've become more comfortable supporting gay people. And so it's just been a really beautiful transition for myself and my whole family over this last year, to live more authentically. And then, like, honestly, I'm the happiest I've been in a very, very long time. And even though I came out ready to date and then COVID hit and totally slammed my plans, it's still been a huge blessing and my family's been amazing and supportive. And so, yeah, a little bit of advice that I would give to, to first of all, to LGBT members of the church is don't shame yourself. And you have to make the decisions that are best for you, no matter what that is. It's between you and God, and that's it. Nobody else has a say. You have to do what's best for you. For parents, just trust that your LGBT person is making the best decision for themselves. You are not the judge. That's between them and God. Just trust God that He's got a plan for your person, your LGBT person. And then advice for leaders is to just ask your LGBT person what they need. They already know the eternal consequences. This is something that they've been carrying around with them for probably their entire life. They've been grappling with this. They have so much emotional, mental weight on their shoulders that they don't need you to shame them. They don't need you to tell them what to do. They need you to just be supportive. Ask them what you can do for them, and they will tell you what they need, whether that's spiritual support, whether that's, being included in activities and callings and things like that. Because honestly, there's no reason. They're completely capable of serving in any capacity in the church. There's nothing different between them and a cis straight person in the church. Absolutely nothing. And then for the average church member, just get to know the LGBT people in your life. Don't ask weird questions. If you have weird questions, Google it. There's also an amazing subreddit called Social Justice 101, which I highly recommend if you have weird questions. But I don't recommend asking insensitive questions. Just get to know your LGBT people as people first, because their sexuality or their gender identity is just, it's arbitrary. It's just a small factor of who they are. You might find out that they're obsessed with football, or they love to ride motorcycles, or they have a disability, or what have you. And so that's my advice for LGBT people and members of the church. And I've rambled on far too long, so I'm gonna pass the microphone on to Mika.
Hello. Question for Jonathan real quick. How much time do we want to set aside for the Q&A?
That is entirely up to you. We're at 2:03. The session ends promptly at 2:20 Eastern time, my time. So if you want to go for 7 minutes, that would give 10 minutes for Q&A, but it's up to you.
Cool.
Or as you want.
I'll try and go for that then. Hi everyone, I'm Mika McIntosh. Yeah, let's just start from the beginning. So I grew up in Wyoming, which being gay probably isn't the greatest place to grow up, but I also come from a multicultural household. My mom is Brazilian. And so like I had that camp going against me too. And then I might not look it, but I was kind of a punk. It's impossible to get me to do something that I don't want to do. I'm not afraid to speak out against things. And when you're in a church setting, people tend to not like that. So people kind of avoided me a lot. And just all of that mixed together made for kind of an interesting experience. I kind of jumping back further, I also knew I was gay about the second grade. When Batman and Robin came out, and I saw Chris O'Donnell, and I just knew. And up until I was 22, I knew. I didn't fight him, like, okay, yeah, I'm gay, that's part of my life. But I'd be damned if I actually admitted that to anyone. And in college, though, is kind of when everything exploded. I guess is one way to put it. I my freshman year, I was preparing to go on a mission. I had never really, I knew I was gay, but I never really done anything with another guy or anything. And I made this friend from a yoga club of all places. And at the start of my second semester, I fell hard for him. Of course, I didn't think he was gay, but surprise, he was. One night it was midnight, I was in his dorm room, and we were just I was talking, I was complaining more accurately. And bless him, he was just sitting there listening, just looking at me. And then at one point he interrupts me and says, can I kiss you? And being the smooth operator that I am, I just kept on talking. He interrupted me again, asked again. Again, I just kept talking, thinking, no, this isn't happening, no. And then he just went for it. And then for the next month and a half, at a sort of LDS school, I was dating another guy. But then the guilt did kind of finally come in, because I thought, no, I was supposed to be preparing for a mission. So I broke things off with him and started preparing again. And then that summer, I realized, oh no, this thing happened, and I don't actually want to go on a mission. All these other people I don't like want me to go on a mission, so why should I go? And so I didn't. And my journey kind of continued from there. I finally came out to someone at school. Actually, if any of you are familiar with Studio C, Tori Pence, her older brother was the first person I ever came out to. And then I started looking online for other gay Mormons, because I knew, we have to be out there, or they have to be out there. Eventually, I turned to Tumblr, and I found that there was kind of a scattered community there. And so with the help of my friend Steph, and with the help of Chris, who unfortunately couldn't be on the panel today, we formed Queer Stake, a place on Tumblr for queer Mormons in any place in their journey to just kind of talk and make friends. And that eventually led to me coming out to everyone. A few years in, this guy from this online magazine wanted to do a story about Queer Stake. And so he did. This was 2015. I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to finally come out, I guess. And so when the article came out, I posted the article, and all I said was, hey, I'm quoted in this, you should read it. And that's how it came out. 5 people liked it. 3 people messaged me after to show support or come out to me also. And it was just this very mellow coming out that I really was everything I wanted. No big fuss or hubbub. And from that point forward, I'm like, cool, I'm just not going to bother to hide it now. And if somebody's like, oh, I didn't know, I'll say, I posted about it. You should really pay attention to my Facebook. It's the only Facebook page you should pay attention to. And that's about then was also kind of when my faith in the church started to falter. I, in 2016, moved to Chicago for grad school, and a lot of stuff just kind of came together. I realized that my entire life, it felt like the church never wanted me, not because I was gay necessarily, but just because of everything that I am, the being half Brazilian, the how I don't just sit back and follow up on. I'm going to ask the questions I want to ask, and I just with a little prodding from my sister, I ended up making the decision to leave the church. After grad school, I moved back here to Utah. This is where I am now. I don't really have a faith system. I'm more about working on myself. And I also started a podcast called Queer Stake, where I interview queer members of the church, active or not. You can find out Spotify or iTunes if you're curious. I interviewed Chris at one point. And I am going to end there so we can do the Q&A. Sorry that was kind of scattered.
No, that was great. Thank you all so much. And you know what? Hearing your stories, that's what's most important. So first off, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and open it up for some questions. There's a few questions that were posted. Let's go ahead and I'll start with the one that has the highest votes. It says, besides a change in doctrine, which is generally beyond the control of the members, not in high leadership, how can church members help create healthy environments for LGBTQ people, especially youth?
So the last Sunday that I attended, the last Fast Sunday that I attended, the last award I ever attended, I got up and I bore my testimony of the ward. And one of the things that I said there was, you know, I was very grateful the members of that ward had taken to heart that little plaque that's on the outside of the building that says visitors welcome. And that even though I was technically not a visitor because I was a member, I always felt welcome, even when I showed up with my coffee, or when I said things that were not approved, or when I talked about not being straight, or whatever. And I think that that's kind of the base level. I think, again, there's a lot of people that want to do well, that want to be better, that want to help people, but they don't ever know where to start. And this is true whether we're talking about being an LGBTIQ ally or being, you know, anti-racist or anything else. And the first step is like educating yourself. But then also, if you want to be seen as a safe space, be a safe space. Like be someone who, first of all, no one's going to know if, you know, that you're safe to talk to if you don't put that out there. Make it known that you're okay being that person. Like, as cheesy as it is, when people wear, like, you know, like when like the mama dragon, you know, like with the mama dragons and wearing like rainbow ribbons or whatever, make it obvious to people, like, that you are a person that is open to being there for them. Like, that's step one, if you actually want people to ever approach you. I mean, anything short of that is like, again, there's lots of people that want to help, but if no one's going to come to you if they don't know that you're safe.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Unfortunately, you know, it depends on ward to ward, you know, how progressive a ward is. There's also a lot of leadership roulette. If you are like a young women's president or a bishop, leadership in the ward, you have a lot more influence over the tone and the acceptance level for youth in the ward. And so, but even then, you still need to be vocal about it. You don't necessarily have to openly oppose church doctrine, but you should, you know, even just wearing, especially for bishops, even if you just wear a little rainbow pin on your lapel, that's going to speak volumes to the youth in your ward. Like, okay, this ward is a safe space. Even if my peers don't necessarily accept me, even if, you know, the super old lady in the back of the chapel that sings super loud in sacrament meeting, even if she doesn't accept me, I'm okay with the bishop, or I'm okay with the young women's leader. And so you don't necessarily have to be super vocal about church doctrine, but just having, you know, saying something, standing up for LGBT people whenever somebody else in the ward might say something derogatory or insensitive. Just saying those little things, maybe wearing a Love Loud t-shirt, just something like that. It speaks volumes, and the LGBT people in your ward are going to know that you are a safe person.
I think also But like doing all of that, but then also when it's one-on-one, not making a big deal out of it. The best people I came out to just didn't make a big deal out of it. My sister's best friend, I was in the car with her, and she was saying something like, "Oh, so like, are we going to Noodles and Co?" And I just kind of said, "Dom, I'm gay." And she said, "Okay, so are we going to Noodles and Co?" And really, like to me anyway, that just, yeah, it means the world. Like I tell you, like, okay, cool, let's move on.
Yeah, I think following up on something that Tiana said was, and I use an example of someone saying something that was really racist in a ward I was in. Someone said something in a Sunday school lesson. I was not in the room, but I was the black guy. So someone came to look for me. He was like, "You won't believe what so-and-so said." And the question I asked that person who came to tell me about that was, did anyone say anything against what he just stood up and said? Right? Like, the thing the person said was not even close to official church anything. It was his own personal opinion that was just really racist. No one said anything and let him say it and get away with it, right? So that same sort of thing happens all the time. And people don't feel comfortable saying anything in opposition, A, because it's not polite, and Mormons like to try to be polite, they think, but also because the church and policy and doctrine about LGBT stuff, it has shifted some in at least the way they present it. And so I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily feel comfortable because they're not sure if what they're pushing back on may or may not be official policy or whatever. But if someone, I mean, I had a time I was teaching a lesson and someone stood up and said, being gay is a sin. And I said, that's not what the church teaches. That's just not. The church says that acting on it is a sin, which is another whole conversation. But even that little distinction matters. Right? Like even that distinction, even if it's still kind of whatever to most of us, like even, you know, whatever, sex is not a sin, it shouldn't be. But even just pointing out that the church's position is not that just having same-sex attraction is a sin, is important, right? So anytime that you can, you know, you can call someone out, politely preferably, because you don't want to be rude, but that you can, you know, kind of push back on someone when they're saying something that is like definitely not true, especially if it's not true by the church's basis, you know, in the church context, do it by all means.
Great, thank you all. So we have, the next question says, is this, and this may end up being our last one. Can you share one moment when you felt like you were fully loved, accepted, and truly belonged at church, with family or friends? Or can you share, or can you share one example when you didn't? I think it's supposed to be a two-parter, but I think in terms of time, I think I'll leave it open.
This is really unfortunate, but I've never once felt like I could be entirely open at church. I am feeling that way with my family now. My dad is a very quiet guy, will even make gay jokes, and it's pretty funny. But I have, you know, had plenty of experiences in Relief Society and Sacrament Meeting where people have gotten up and said really insensitive things. Sacrament Meeting is especially difficult because you can't just correct them in the moment. But yeah, every ward I've been in, there's always been somebody that has said something really insensitive and it's not been corrected. And so that's unfortunate, and I'm hoping things change soon. I don't know if things might be different in other more liberal areas, but so far in Idaho, it's not fantastic.
Thanks for being vulnerable with that. I appreciate that. Mika, Nick, do you want to answer the question, either part of that question?
I guess sorry, Mika.
No,
you know,
you're fine.
Again, like my church experiences, I'm not really gonna touch on too much with this question, but I think that like with family, I've been very fortunate. My family's been very okay with it. My dad is a Black man from the South who's, you know, a little older. I was a little concerned coming out to him, but I came out to him. We were sitting down, we had lunch together. Everyone else in my family already knew. I told him, and he was like, okay, and we just continued the conversation. It was like nothing had changed, and that to me meant a lot, because I've never known my dad to be homophobic or anything, but stereotypes exist, and African American folks in the South, it's not that accepted in the like in the Black community or in the South. So it was really, it was really nice for it to be that easy and for him to be that okay with it.
Really quick, mine's also about my dad. Two separate occasions. Once when I was 16, I remember I was watching Captain or Dr. Terrible's sing-along blog, and Neil Patrick Harris is gay, and for whatever reason, I decided to tell my dad, "Oh, do you know Neil Patrick Harris is gay?" And then my dad, who I feel bad this is the first thing I'm saying about him, because he's actually a very kind, loving man. But he said, like, well, that's disgusting. And then I looked at him and said, no, it's not. And ended the conversation right there. Because I was 16, I very much enjoyed talking back to adults. But now my dad, that example of like not feeling loved by family, but now my dad will ask about my dating life. He will laugh at my bad date stories, and his journey has just been really nice, of going to like a little curmudgeonly about it, to being like, you know what, yeah, I was dumb, there's nothing wrong, I will always love you, and I'm here for you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Well, our time is up for this session. I would like to thank you all for attending and also for supporting Sunstone. This isn't in my script, but if anyone wants to connect with any of the panelists, you can reach out to them on the Whova app, reach out to them online, and thank you all so much for attending. I'm going to go ahead and end the session now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.